For decades, Jennifer Aniston has been more than just a star. She has been a living symbol of beauty, grace and resilience forever etched into the collective memory of popular culture through her iconic portrayal of Rachel Green in Friends. She is not only America's sweetheart, but the heartbeat of an entire generation, where every radiant smile concealed a crack, and every graceful step was taken on the shattered glass of private pain. Behind the golden glow and glittering spotlight is a woman bearing wounds that time could never heal, of fractured childhood love stories that crumbled under the world's unforgiving gaze, and a silent soul-tearing battle to become a mother ending in despair. Yet now at 55, life's storm still clings tightly to her, a cold, consuming pain that threatens to shatter the peace she has spent a lifetime building. If Jennifer Aniston has ever made you laugh, cry, or believe in love, again let your like be a tribute to this remarkable woman of unyielding strength. Behind every golden surname lies a story far less glamorous. And for Jennifer Joanna Aniston, born on February 1969 in Sherman Oaks, Los Angeles, the glitter of a Hollywood lineage could never mask the cracks in its fragile foundation. Long before the world adored her, as Rachel Green in Friends, she was just a little girl caught between the light of the camera and the shadows at home. Her father, John Aniston, a Greek-born actor with a commanding screen presence, and her mother, Nancy Dow, an American actress of Italian English, Irish, Scottish, and Greek descent, gave her a heritage steeped in culture and art. She had two half-brothers, John Mellick older, and from her mother's first marriage, and Alex Aniston much younger from her father's later relationship. Her godfather, the legendary actor Tully Savalas, painted another stroke of Hollywood into her childhood, but fame, she would later say, was something that surrounded me, not something that filled me. When Jennifer was just a toddler, her father's career took the family across the country to the buzzing heart of New York City. The skyscrapers and bright marquees dazzled her young eyes, but the light could not chase away the growing darkness inside her home. By the time she was 9, the marriage between her parents had fractured beyond repair. One day her father left not just for work, but out of her daily life for a long stretch. She has recalled that moment as more than an absence. It was the silence afterward that was the hardest. That heartbreaking quiet taught her far too young that love could disappear without warning. At home, another battle was unfolding. Her mother, known for her striking beauty, often held Jennifer to rigid standards of appearance. Comments about her weight, her posture, or how she should wear her hair were frequent, meant perhaps as guidance, but to a sensitive child, they could feel cruel. The words lingered like tiny shards, planting seeds of self-doubt that would take decades to unearth. Life was not cushioned by wealth. Money was often tight, and emotional warmth could feel like a luxury. Jennifer learned early to entertain others, to make people laugh, to diffuse tension, not just as a gift, but as a shield. If they were laughing, she once said, maybe they wouldn't see the cracks. As she stepped tentatively into adulthood and an emerging career in Hollywood, one of the deepest wounds of her youth would be torn open again. In 1996, her mother appeared on a tabloid talk show revealing private details of her daughter's life. The fracture turned truly tragic when Nancy published a memoir, From Mother and Daughter to Friends, telling her side of the story to the world. To Jennifer, it felt like a betrayal, exposed under the harshest lights. For the next 15 years, she and her mother would not speak. Some things, she later reflected, take a long time to heal, if they ever do. These early storms, a father's sudden absence, a mother's unyielding scrutiny, the public rupture of trust, shaped Jennifer into someone both guarded and fiercely self-reliant. They gave her an empathy for pain she had seen up close, and a resilience that would carry her through the unforgiving glare of fame. In the warmth of the spotlight, millions would see the radiant smile, the easy wit, the poise. But in the quiet corners of her memory lives the little girl who learned to survive in a world where affection was uncertain and trust could be fragile. A girl who would turn those scars into the steel of her spine, building one of Hollywood's most enduring and admired careers. It was in the quiet, hidden corners of her childhood refuge, scribbling in worn notebooks, slipping away into daydreams, that Jennifer first felt the magnetic pull of performance, a fragile spark that would one day outshine the long shadows cast by her fractured home. By 1975, at just 6 years old, while most children lost themselves in playground laughter, She was already crossing the threshold into imaginary worlds, discovering in drama a sanctuary where she could be anyone, anywhere. Her parents enrolled her at the Waldorf School, a haven where creativity was not just encouraged, but celebrated, giving her the first safe stage on which to test her voice. Even then, she sensed that storytelling could be more than an escape. It could be a lifeline, a way to touch hearts she had never met. In 1983 at 14, she stepped into a crucible that would both sharpen and challenge her, the prestigious LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts in New York City. Here, under the watchful guidance of revered acting coach Anthony Abison, she learned that true acting wasn't about pretending. It was about standing unguarded, letting the world see your soul. U skučenim prostorijama za probe s blagim mirisom prašine i boje, pronalazila je i uzbuđenje i strah. Samo sam htjela negdje pripadati, rekla bi desetljećima kasnije, a glas joj je nosio i zahvalnost, i bol tih tinejdžerskih godina. Diplomiranje 1987 nije joj donijelo ostvarenje sna. To je uvelo do mukotrpnog rada. U kasnim tinejdžerskim i ranim 20-ima, Jennifer je sastavljala temelje za preživljavanje, radeći razne poslove, prodajući timeshare-ove u slabo osvjetljenim telemarketinškim uredima, poslužujući obroke kupcima, koji su je jedva gledali u oči i raznoseći dostave kroz surove ulice Manhattana na zveckavom rabljenom biciklu. Svaka smjena kupovala joj je taman dovoljno vremena za još jednu audiciju, još jednu krhku nadu. Njen prvi bljesak ekrana dogodio se 1988, godine ulogom u seriji Mac and Me, koja će vam nedostajati, nakon čega je uslijedio rad kao model za Nutrisystem i povremene reklame koje su joj održavale snove. No, televizija se pokazala još zahtjevnijom. Između 1990 i 1994 godine dobila je uloge u serijama Malloy Ferris Bueller, Camp Cucamonga The Edge i Muddling Through. Svaka je na trenutak zapaljena, a zatim ugašena prije nego što je mogla zagrijati njezinu karijeru. Stalno sam mislila, možda ovo nije za mene, priznala je kasnije, riječi su joj bile teške, od sjećanja na te lažne početke. Ciklus audicija kratkih bljeskova uspjeha i iznenadnih otkazivanja nagrizao joj je duh. Do 1994, sa samo 25 godina, bila je emocionalno istrošena tiho, se pitajući je li djevojčica koja se nekoć skrivala u pričama bila naivna, vjerujući da u njima može stvarno živjeti. A onda se sudbina pojavila u najneobičnijoj krinki. Jednog običnog poslijepodneva na benzinskoj postaji u Los Angelesu ukrstila se s Warrenom Littlefieldom, tadašnjim predsjednikom NBC Entertainmenta. Razgovor je bio kratak, ali njegova težina bila je nemjerljiva. Poticao ju je da ne odustaje da dođe na audiciju za novu humorističnu seriju koju je mreža razvijala. Imaš nešto u sebi, nemoj odustat, rekao. Joj je. A Jennifer su se te riječi činile kao sunčeva svjetlost nakon godina oblačnog neba. Ta humoristična serija zvaće se Prijatelji. Još nije mogla znati da će uloga koja je čeka redefinirati televiziju katapultirati je do svjetske slave i trajno urezati njezino ime na kartu popularne kulture. Ali u tom trenutku ono što je bilo važno bilo je jednostavno. Prvi put nakon dugo vremena netko na vlasti ju je istinski vidio i zato nije odustala. Kad je Jennifer 1994 godine ušla u NBC-jevu sobu, za audiciju nije mogla ni zamisliti da će ravno upasti u ulogu koja će je te okruniti slavom i okovati nevidljivim lancima. Čitala je za Monicu, ali producenti su vidjeli nešto što nisu mogli pustiti. Alkemiju humora krhkosti i one rijetke iskre koja lik tjera da diše. I tako je Rachel Green postala njezina, kao da ju je uloga cijelo vrijeme čekala. Od trenutka kada je su izgovorila svoju prvu rečenicu, njezina oštra duhovitost, razoružavajuća toplina i bljeskovi nečuvane ranjivosti obasjali su ekran. Ne samo za publiku u studiju, već i za milijune koji će je osjetiti kao prijateljicu u vlastitom dnevnom boravku. Sljedećih 10 godina Prijatelji nisu bili samo kralj četvrtka navečer. Postali su kulturni otkucaj srca, pulsirajući u svakom kutku svijeta. Saga o Rossu i Rachel pretvorila se u najiščekivaniju ljubavnu priču na televiziji, učvrstivši Jennifer kao lice romanse za cijelu generaciju. Pa ipak iza blistavog smijeha učila je oštar ritam reflektora. Svaka frizura postala je vijest, svaka odjevna kombinacija analizirana. Njezin vlastiti život postao je otvorena stranica koju su čitali i prepisivali stranci. Granice između Jennifer i Rachel zamaglile su se sve, dok čak i ona ponekad nije osjetila težinu lika kako joj pritišće kožu. Slava shvatila je, možete u jednom trenutku obaviti toplinom, a u sljedećem spržiti. Trofeji su ispričali dio priče. Emmy Zlatni globus, nagrada Screen Actors Guild, a do posljednje sezone neviđenih $1 milijun po epizodi učinili su je jednom od najplaćenijih televizijskih zvijezda. Ali brojke su skrivale ono što kamera nije mogla uhvatiti. Tiha iscrpljenost očekivanja, budi savršen, budi smiješan. Budi Rachel kakvu su te stvorili. Bio je to neizmjeran dar, ali i pozlačeni kavez koji je bila odlučna otključati. Godine 2002 izašla je iz kalupa s filmom Dobra djevojka, odbacivši glamur kako bi otkrila sirovu bolnu ljudskost koja je zapanjila kritičare. Godinu dana kasnije, Bruce Almighty je srušila rekorde kino, blagajnama, dokazujući da se može nositi s najvećim hollywoodskim arenama. Svaka uloga bila je mala pobuna podsjetnik samoj sebi, prije svega da je više od jednog lica, jednog glasa, jedne priče. Godine nakon Prijatelja bile su delikatan ples između ponovnog izmišljanja i očuvanja. Prekid iz 2006 dopustio joj je da iskoristi slomljeno srce za humor. Marley i ja iz 2008 prikupio je $200 milijuna i ostavio publiku do suza. Strašni šefovi iz 2011 pokazali su njezinu neustrašivu komičnu stranu i film We're the Millers iz 2013 dodao je još jedan hit na popis. Na papiru to je bio trijumf za trijumfom, ali privatno je i dalje vodila tihe bitke štiteći dijeliće sebe, koje javnost nikada nije mogla imati, čak i dok je svijet zahtijevao više. Njezin povratak na televiziju 2019 s emisijom The Morning Show nije bio povratak. Bio je to povratak. Noseći i krunu zvijezde i plašt izvršne producentice, uložila je desetljeća otpornosti u priču o istini moći i preživljavanju u nemilosrdnoj industriji. The role earned her Emmy and Golden Globe nominations, but more importantly, it gave her a platform to speak with the full force of her voice. Alongside this, she embraced streaming projects like Netflix's Dumpling 2018 and gifted the world a poignant moment of nostalgia with HBO Max's Friends reunion. 2021 bridging generations without ever standing still. Through every reinvention, Jennifer Aniston has kept her seat in Hollywood's highest circle, not by clinging to the past, but by daring to rewrite herself in the present. The little girl who once feared the door might slam shut forever now walks through any she chooses, and still, after all the years, all the headlines, all the roles that have made her a household name, one truth remains. Jennifer keeps a part of herself untouchable, hidden away from the glare, a piece that belongs only to her. Fresh off the roaring success of Friends and a run of film roles that silenced anyone who thought she was just a sitcom star, Jennifer Aniston stood in rarefied air. She was America's sweetheart, a global icon, her smile bright enough to light up billboards and her name big enough to command a movie poster. The world knew her as Rachel Green, as the quick-witted charmer on every magazine rack, but in 1998, at the dazzling height of her career, life was about to hand her something that felt even more extraordinary love, and not the scripted kind. It began quietly without red carpets or press junkets arranged by mutual friends who thought they might suit. A blind date, they called it, though everyone in Hollywood could have drawn their faces from memory. Brad Pitt was cinema's golden boy, a leading man whose blend of smolder and sincerity had made him a household name from Legends of the Fall to Seven. They were two supernovas burning at full intensity, colliding in a city where collisions often end in fire. The night they met, there were no cameras, no handlers, just two people sitting across from each other, trading stories until the noise of the world thinned to silence. It was easy, Jennifer would later recall her voice soft with nostalgia, easy in a way that made the endless flashbulbs and gossip columns seem far away, as if she'd stepped out of the glare and into something real. When they stepped into public view together, the reaction was instant and electric. The tabloids anointed them Hollywood's golden couple before they'd even boarded their first vacation flight. To the outside world, they weren't just dating. They were a walking emblem of romance, proof that beauty and fame could coexist with something genuine. The air around them seemed to shimmer with possibility. By 1999, Brad proposed, and the media frenzy reached fever pitch. Paparazzi camped outside restaurants. Speculation about the wedding filled column inches, and fans treated their love story like a serial they couldn't stop watching. Jennifer wore her happiness without disguise on red carpets where their hands never strayed far from each other's, in interviews, where his name drew an unforced smile, and in those stolen candids where they looked like two people sharing a secret. On July 29, 2000, they wed in Malibu. It was a fortress against the outside world, high walls guarding something both monumental and intimate. Inside, 200 guests gathered under a sky painted gold by the California sun. There were cascades of flowers, the glow of 1,000 candles, and when night fell, fireworks over the Pacific that mirrored the extravagance of their joy. Jennifer in her beaded gown walked toward Brad with a look that could melt even the most cynical hearts. The grainy long-lens photographs that trickled out only fueled the myth. Here finally was Hollywood's happily ever after. Their marriage wasn't just personal, it was creative. Together, they founded Plan B Entertainment, a production company built on the belief that storytelling could shape the world. To their admirers, it was more than a union. It was a fusion of ambition and vision, a promise that they would build not just a home, but a legacy. Friends would later say she seemed lighter in those years, as though the guardedness she'd carried since childhood had been gently set down. In interviews, she spoke of Brad with an ease and warmth that suggested she'd found not just a husband, but a partner in the truest sense. "He's my best friend," she told one reporter, eyes bright. For a while, it felt like her life had reached its perfect symmetry. A career at its peak, a marriage envied by millions, a future that stretched wide and unbroken. Looking back now, it's easy to see why their story captured so many hearts. It wasn't just that they were impossibly beautiful, it was that the timing was perfect. Both had weathered enough of fame's storms to recognize calm seas when they found them. To see them together was to believe, if only briefly, that in the chaos of Hollywood, something pure could last. In sunlit Malibu afternoons, when the cameras were gone and the world was far away, Jennifer Aniston looked as though she had found exactly what the little girl inside her had always wanted: a safe place to belong. For a time she had it, and for a time it felt unbreakable. Every fairy tale has an ending, but Jennifer Aniston never imagined hers would be rewritten so publicly, so brutally. In 2031, she had stood under a sky of Malibu fireworks, believing she was stepping into forever. 5 godina kasnije, s 36 godina, našla se kako zuri u sasvim drugačiju vrstu svjetla, neumoljivi bljesak paparazzi žarulja. Prve pukotine bile su tanke, gotovo nevidljive, skrivene ispod zlatnog furnira, dviju isprepletenih karijera. Između crvenih tepiha i sastanaka, uprave plana B, između radosti zajedničkih pobjeda i tihog ponosa gledanja jedni drugih, kako rade nešto suptilno se počelo mijenjati. Neumoljivi rasporedi koji su se nekoć činili kao dokaz ambicije sada, su postali neizrečena granica. Tjedni su se stopili u mjesece provedene oceanima, odvojeno svaki ispunjen zahtjevima filmskih setova i pres turneja, sve dok intimnost nije postala rijedak gost. Bili smo poput brodova koji prolaze noću kasnije, bi razmišljala mašući iz dalekih luka do kojih nismo mogli stići na vrijeme. Početkom 2005 šaputanja su se pojačala. Isprva su to bili zvukovi u pozadini beskrajnog zujanja tračeva o slavnim osobama. Zatim su se pretvorila u urlik koji ju je pratio u svaku sobu. Fotografije su bile secirane, pogled nije uzvraćen, prstenjak gol, odvojeni dolasci na događaje na koje su oduvijek ulazili ruku pod ruku. A onda je uslijedila oluja naslovnica sugestija da je Braidova kemija na ekranu s Angelinom Jolie i gospodinom i gospođom Smith prešla u stvarnost. Niti jedno od njih nije to potvrdilo, ali u kulturi koja se gosti implikacijama šutnja je bila sama sebi osudna presuda. Jennifer više nije samo živjela svoj život, bila je zarobljena u narativu koji nije napisala, koji se ponavljao na svakom TV ekranu, prelijevao preko svake sjajne naslovnice, sve dok se nije uvukao u zidove njezina doma. Objava o njihovom razvodu u siječnju 2005 pala je poput detonacije. Obožavatelji su tugovali kao da su izgubili nešto osobno, ali za Jennifer je to bio raspad života u kojem je zamišljala da stari. Paparaci su kampirali ispred njezine kuće, okidači njihovih fotoaparata kliktali su poput mehaničkog otkucaja srca kad god bi izašla van. Čak su i najobičniji poslovi kupnja namirnica, uzimanje kave postali izazovi svaki od kojih je svijetu pružao još jednu priliku da traži dokaze o njezinom slomu. Bilo je nevjerojatno bolno, rekla je kasnije za Vanity Fair, glasom mirnim ali teškim. I ne znam hoću li se ikada naviknuti na to koliko je to bilo javno. Zatim je uslijedila najokrutnija rana glasina da nije htjela djecu da je njezina vlastita ambicija otrovala brak. Za ženu, čije su lice tijelo i izbori secirani desetljećima, ova optužba zadala je dublje od bilo koje druge. Želim i hoću rekla je oštro, a bljesak vatre odao je bol ispod nje. Nije to bio samo trač, bio je to napad na njezinu ženstvenost, njezinu sposobnost za ljubav život koji bi još mogla izgraditi. Noći su bile najteže, prijatelji se sjećaju povratka u kuću, toliko tihu da se činilo da tišina pritišće zidove. Krevet se činio prevelikim, kava je bila skuhana za jednu osobu. She leaned heavily on therapy, using it as a lifeline, a place where she could sort through the wreckage without the roar of the outside world. Yoga anchored her to the present, each inhale and exhale, reminding her she was still here, and her closest friends, the ones who had known her before, the fame became her shield. On set, she sometimes arrived with eyes rimmed red from the night before, yet delivered performances so layered they felt like open wounds on screen. She didn't hide the pain, she turned it into craft. Heartbreak became truth, loss became art. For the tabloids, the Brad and Jen split was gold. For her, it was a public autopsy of love under the harshest lights imaginable. The woman who emerged from that crucible was not the same one who had walked down the Malibu aisle in 2000. She was sharper, more guarded, but also more certain of who she was without anyone else's shadow. She no longer needed the world to believe in her fairy tale, she had learned to live without it. Years later, she would speak of that time without venom, as though she had made peace with the fact that not all love stories are meant to last. You can't hold on to anger. She said it eats you alive. You have to forgive even if you can't forget. These were not the words of the 20-something America's sweetheart. They belonged to a woman who had walked through fire and found she could stand unshaken in the ashes. For Jennifer Aniston, the end of her marriage was more than a heartbreak. It was a collision between love and the machinery of fame, between private grief and public hunger. And yet, from the ruins of one of the most scrutinized breakups of her generation, she carried away something more enduring than the fairy tale itself, the quiet, unshakable strength to begin again. Every ending leaves an echo. For Jennifer Aniston, the echo of 2005 didn't fade when the divorce papers were signed. It reverberated for years, amplified by a world that refused to let the story go. Almost overnight, the fairy tale image of Brad and Jen was replaced by the fevered fascination with Brangelina. The headlines shifted, the photographs changed, and suddenly the man who had once been the other half of her life was now part of a new sprawling narrative, one that played out across continents and magazine covers. Brad and Angelina's growing family, the biological children, the adoptions, the humanitarian trips became a global spectacle. And every time another baby was born, every time a new photo of their picture-perfect brood appeared, Jennifer's name was dragged back into the spotlight she had never asked for. The comparisons were relentless, the juxtapositions cruel, radiant family portraits set against the tired trope of Jennifer's empty arms. Tabloids turned her body into a battleground. Was she pregnant? Was that a bump? Had she waited too long? Why was she still childless? The questions weren't just invasive, they were corrosive, gnawing at the very core of her identity as a woman. It was exhausting, she would say years later, her voice softer now, but still carrying the weight of that scrutiny. I was living my life, doing my work, and yet somehow, I was reduced to whether or not I had a ring on my finger or a child in my belly. The heartbreak of losing her marriage was already a wound. This was salt ground into it again and again by strangers who believed they had the right to define her worth. Jennifer endured, but endurance didn't come easily. She rebuilt herself slowly, brick by emotional brick. In those years, work became both a refuge and a proving ground. She chose roles that defied the America's sweetheart box. The good girl. 2002 had shown she could strip away glamour for grit, but now she pushed further. Cake 2014 laid her raw and unadorned before audiences, earning critical acclaim and proving she could channel pain into art. The Morning Show 2019 allowed her to pour her own scars into a character navigating betrayal, sexism, and the unrelenting glare of the public eye. Off-screen, she anchored herself in the constants that fame couldn't corrode. A tight circle of loyal friends, the grounding discipline of yoga, the quiet work of therapy. These weren't trends, they were survival. Breath by breath, pose by pose, session by session. She stitched herself back together in ways the public would never see. In 2016, after years of swallowing the media's narrative, she took back the pen. Her essay for the record cut through the noise with unflinching clarity. We are complete with or without a mate, with or without a child. She wrote, "It was not a plea for sympathy. It was a declaration of sovereignty. For once, the world was reading her words, not someone else's version of her life." In interviews that followed, she spoke with a candor that startled those still clinging to the image of the untouched golden girl. She admitted to undergoing IVF treatments. She wished someone had told her to freeze her eggs earlier. She accepted with grace and without apology that motherhood might not be the path her life would take. "I have zero regrets," she said, not because the road had been easy, but because she refused to let unfulfilled expectations diminish the life she had built. The betrayal, the loss, the years of being defined by what and who she no longer had, could have broken her. And in truth, they had broken her in places unseen. But the measure of Jennifer Aniston was never in her unbrokenness. It was in the way she learned to carry the broken pieces with grace, with humor, with an unshakable sense of self. Today, she is no longer the woman left behind. She is the woman who stood back up, a woman who understands that fairy tales are not given. They are chosen. And sometimes the bravest choice is to write a story in which you save yourself. Through every tabloid headline, every personal loss, every whispered judgment, Jennifer Aniston has emerged not as a relic of a romance gone wrong, but as the author of her own survival. Her journey has never been one of perfection. It has been one of perseverance, and that more than any love story, more than any role, is what makes her truly unforgettable. When Jennifer Aniston fell in love again, this time with John Mayer, the world hoped she had finally found peace. And in those first soft weeks, so did she. It had been nearly 3 years since her divorce from Brad Pitt. And at 39, Jennifer had learned the delicate art of walking through the world with her heart half guarded. She told herself she wouldn't fall too quickly, wouldn't give too much. But love has a way of slipping past even the strongest walls. John was younger, a musician with a restless energy, the kind of man whose charm felt a little dangerous. He could make her laugh until her eyes crinkled over dinner one night, then leave her staring at her silent phone the next, wondering if she had imagined the connection. They met when Jennifer was still piecing herself back together, tender from old wounds, still relearning how to stand without leaning on anyone. At first, he was a spark in a life that had grown too careful, a reminder that she could still feel the rush of newness, the dizzy lift of possibility. But sparks can burn just as easily as they can warm. His world moved at a speed she didn't always want to match. Music tours across continents, after parties that stretched into morning, late-night wanderings that left her awake alone. She craved steadiness, the quiet comfort of knowing where someone would be when the sun came up. He chased motion. The end came with the quiet brutality of betrayal, not the cinematic kind with dramatic confrontations, but the slow erosion of trust, the gnawing suspicion that her heart was no longer safe. She would later admit how much it stung to be blindsided to realize that someone you had let into your most private spaces could still choose to walk away without looking back. In the weeks after, her home felt different. The kitchen was too quiet, the bed felt too big. She'd make tea in the still hours after midnight, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the house, wondering why the echo of footsteps seemed louder once they were gone. It would be 3 years before Jennifer Aniston would dare to fall deeply again, this time with Justin Theroux. But those years in between were not empty. They were filled with a kind of quiet reckoning, the kind that comes only after you've been broken in ways both public and private. By then, she had endured 2 heartbreaks that had shaped her in entirely different ways. The first, the most public breakup of her generation, her marriage to Brad Pitt, played out like a global spectacle. The second, with John Mayer in 2008, cut in the privacy of her own home, where betrayal echoed in the stillness. She had learned that the spotlight could magnify pain, but the shadows could make it sharper. In 2011, at 42, she met Justin on the set of Wanderlust. Something about him, thoughtful, artistic, with a quiet humor that steadied her, felt like a different kind of promise. This wasn't the reckless spark of a musician or the blinding glamour of a movie star. It was a slow, steady warmth. For the first time in years, she let herself believe in the possibility of something lasting. 4 years later, in August 2015, they stood in the courtyard of their Bel Air mansion, surrounded by close friends, and exchanged vows. She was 46, and it felt like a second chance at forever. A chapter she had once feared might never be written. For a while, it was exactly what she'd dreamed of. There were Sunday mornings with coffee and newspapers spread across the kitchen island, long talks that stretched lazily into the night, and the kind of laughter that filled the halls like sunlight. In interviews, she spoke of Justin with the same open warmth she'd once shown in the early days, with Brad calling him her partner, her best friend. Friends saw it too, the way her shoulders seemed lighter, the way her smile lingered a little longer. But even the steadiest ground can shift beneath you. The changes came quietly, almost politely at first. Work schedules pulling them in different directions, conversations growing shorter, silences growing longer. By the time 2017 arrived, the gap between them felt wider than any single moment could explain. 2 years after their wedding, they announced their separation. There was no tabloid storm this time, no third-act betrayal for the world to feast on, only the private devastation of realizing that love, even when it runs deep, isn't always enough to keep two lives in rhythm. She was 48, then old enough to know healing would come, but still young enough to feel the sting of having to start over yet again. Those close to her say she tried to keep the hurt low to the ground, speaking in interviews of mutual respect and friendship. But they also remember the way the house felt different after he left. The music was softer, the laughter rarer, the rooms echoing in a way they hadn't before. 3 great loves, 3 goodbyes. Each had left its own mark, but together they formed a map of scars. Not the bull kind you hide, but the kind you learn to live inside of. For Jennifer, the lesson was not just that love can end. Radilo se o tome da može završiti na 1000 načina pod žarom javnosti, u sjeni privatne izdaje ili u tihom raspletu dvoje ljudi koji se jednostavno udaljavaju. I svaki put, bez obzira na to kako se dogodi promijenite, ali čak i kada su naslovi izblijedjeli i tračevi se utišali, jedna odsutnost je ostala. Tišina u njezinom životu daleko dublja od tišine prazne kuće. Dijete za kojim je žudjela, a nikada ga nije držala u naručju. Jennifer Aniston oduvijek je zamišljala da će jednog dana negdje između filmskih setova, premijera i tihih nedjeljnih jutara kod kuće čuti mali čudesni plač vlastitog djeteta. Nije o tome često govorila u javnosti. Neki snovi su previše delikatni da bi se izrazili riječima, pogotovo kada živite pod mikroskopom. Ali desetljećima su tabloidi njezinu najintimniju nadu pretvarali u svoj omiljeni spektakl. Pratili su njezino tijelo tražeći znakove, uvećavajući svaki mekani nabor njezina trbuha, zumirajući svaku lepršavu haljinu, postavljajući isto okrutno nametljivo pitanje. Je li trudna? Od majčinstva su napravili semafor, kao da se njezina vrijednost kao žene može mjeriti u djeci koju je rodila ili nije rodila. Ono što ti naslovi nikada nisu pokazali bila je stvarnost koju je živjela iza zatvorenih vrata. Sterilna hladnoća klinika za plodnost, miris antiseptika u zraku, papirnati ogrtač koji se gužvao pod njom dok je sjedila na stolu za pregled slušajući liječnike, kako odmjerenim tonom govore o hormonskim injekcijama, broju jajnih stanica i neumoljivoj matematici vremena. Pokušala je sve rundu za rundom IVF-a, tijelo joj je bilo prekriveno modricama, odigala hormoni su joj bujali i rušili se poput plime. Okrenula se i istočnjačkoj medicini, biljnim lijekovima, akupunkturi, svemu što bi joj moglo dati šansu. Svaki ciklus je počinjao krhkom iskrom nade, a završavao razornom riječju negativno odsutnošću otkucaja srca na monitoru tišinom, koja je uslijedila poput jeke u praznoj sobi. U kasnim 30-ima voljela je da joj je netko rekao da zamrzne jajašca. Voljela je da joj je dan prostor da donese te odluke bez blještavila javnosti, bez stalnog zujanja pitanja stranaca koji su mislili da je njezino tijelo njihova stvar. U intervjuima godinama kasnije otvoreno će govoriti o tom žaljenju, ne da izazove sažaljenje, već da kaže istinu. Bila je umorna od narativa koji su je prikazivali kao sebičnu ili nepotpuno umorna od ideje da je ženski život potvrđen samo brakom i majčinstvom. Bilo je dana kada je bol odsutnosti bila nepodnošljiva jutra, kada bi se probudila u tišini svog doma, osjećajući težinu neisplakanih suza kako joj pritiskaju oči noći, kada se krevet činio preširokim, a kuća previše tihom. Mogla je zamisliti život o kojem je nekoć sanjala malu ruku u svojoj uspavanke rođendanske svijeće i osjetiti oštar ubod spoznaje da to možda nikada neće biti njezino. Nekih dana ta ju je istina ispraznila, drugih dana ju je ojačala. In 2016 at 47, Jennifer decided to take the narrative back. In a searing essay for HuffPost titled, "For the Record," she dismantled the myths once and for all. We are complete, with or without a mate, with or without a child. It wasn't just a line for the world. It was a vow to herself. She refused to be defined by what she didn't have, or by the outdated expectations that still clung to women in Hollywood and beyond. She was more than the sum of her relationships, more than her ability or inability to bear children. By 2022, in a Candid Allure interview, she revealed for the first time that she had undergone years of IVF, that she had thrown everything at it, and that it simply hadn't worked. There was no bitterness in her voice, only the quiet truth of someone who had walked through disappointment and survived it. She admitted she wished someone had told her to freeze her eggs earlier, but she no longer lived in the shadow of that what if. Motherhood, she had come to understand, could take many forms, and sometimes it meant nurturing yourself. Marriage no longer held the same allure it once did. Never say never, she would say when asked, but she wasn't looking. She had learned often painfully that her peace was not dependent on the presence of a partner, nor on the fulfillment of a single life script. The years of public speculation, failed treatments, and private heartbreak had reshaped her. She had been the ingenue, the wife, the divorcee, the tabloid target. She had been called the woman left behind, the queen of failed love, childless, by choice, each label cutting in its own way, and yet she had also been the survivor, the woman who turned pain into art, who rebuilt herself with therapy, yoga, and a fiercely loyal circle of friends. Today, Jennifer Aniston stands as her own creation, scarred, strong, and whole in ways no one can measure. She knows that fairy tales aren't given, they're chosen, written, rewritten. And sometimes the most powerful ending isn't the one with the wedding or the baby, but the one where you choose yourself over and over again, because in the end, she didn't need the world to see her as complete. She already was, and that more than any role, more than any love story, is what makes her truly unforgettable. Jennifer Aniston's present life is not defined by what she has lost, but by what she has built. Yet the shadows of old wounds still live quietly in the corners. At 56, she splits her time between her serene Bel Air mansion, purchased in 2011 for $21 million, and lovingly redesigned with her longtime collaborator, Stephen Shadley, and a charming Montecito farmhouse she bought in 2021 from Oprah Winfrey for $14 million. The Bel Air estate, with its sweeping views and quiet courtyards, is more than just a house. It's the place where she once married Justin Theroux, where laughter once filled the halls, and where after the separation, she learned to live alone again. It remains her primary sanctuary, a fortress of glass, stone, and memories. Over the years, Jennifer has been as meticulous in shaping her surroundings as she has in reshaping her life. She once owned the Ohana House in Beverly Hills, purchased for $13 million after her divorce from Brad Pitt, and sold for $42 million. And the Beverly Hills mansion she shared with Brad, bought for $13 million, sold for $29 million in 2006. A home once photographed in every architectural magazine as the pinnacle of Hollywood glamour. There was a Malibu beach house she rented from Larry Ellison, a Laurel Canyon home during her friend's era, and a pair of West Village condos in New York City. She eventually sold at a loss of $500,000. Each address marked a chapter, beginnings, middles, and inevitable endings. Now in Montecito, she lives down the road from Ariana Grande and the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, but her favorite company remains her beloved dogs, Chesterfield, Clyde, Sophie, and the keepsakes of her late dog Dolly, whose collar still rests in a special place. Her garage tells its own story, a Bentley Continental GT worth around $250,000, a rugged Jeep Wrangler for coastal drives, and a Land Rover Range Rover for longer escapes. But most days her travel is no farther than the kitchen, the yoga studio on her property, or the sunlit patio where she tends to her plants. She is, by her own admission, happiest at home, cooking, rearranging furniture, caring for her garden, experimenting with recipes, or methodically organizing a drawer until every spoon, every spice feels just right. Physically, she remains luminous, not because she is chasing youth, but because she is devoted to caring for herself. Yoga and strength training are daily rituals. Her diet is clean but not joyless. She invests in deep skincare, hydration, and rest. Friends say she has the kind of energy that fills a room without demanding it. She has long stopped worrying about whether her body will ever carry a child. But she acknowledges there are scars that no amount of acceptance fully erases. Those scars trace back to years of public speculation, to the relentless tabloid fixation on whether she was pregnant, whether each tiny change in her body meant a baby was on the way. Even after she publicly pushed back in a 2016 HuffPost essay declaring, "We are complete with or without a mate with or without a child," the questions didn't fully stop. Godine, 2022, u rijetkom trenutku pune iskrenosti i privlačnosti, otkrila je da je prošla IVF, isprobala istočnjačku medicinu i podnijela bolno srce zbog neuspjeha. Priznala je da bi voljela da joj je netko ranije rekao da zamrzne jajne stanice. Ima dana priznala je kada se tišina u njezinom domu čini težom nego inače, ali naučila je kroz godine terapije i osobne i grupne prihvatiti te osjećaje, ne dopuštajući im da je definiraju. Ljubav se vratila u njezin život, ali pod drugačijim uvjetima. Nakon raspada braka s Justinom Therouxom 2017, Godine nije aktivno tražila partnera. Nikad ne reci nikad, rekla je o ponovnom braku, ali ja ne tražim. Godinama je smatrana najpoželjnijom hollywoodskom slobodnjakinjom, etiketa koja je bila i laskava i iscrpljujuća. U novije vrijeme tiho je povezivana s Jimom Curtisom, bivšim kreativnim direktorom Soul Cycla i sadašnjim poduzetnikom u području wellnessa. To nije romansa kojom se razmeće možda zato što je naučila cijenu puštanja svijeta u svoje najintimnije prostore. Prijateljini kažu da je on nasmijava više sluša nego što priča i razumije život koji je sama izgradila. Više nije pitanje hoće li to trajati zauvijek. Za Jennifer je mjera osjeća li se sada stvarno. Profesionalno ona je i dalje sila. Njena uloga u The Morning Show i dalje je učvršćuje kao jednu od najisplativijih i kritički najcijenjenijih televizijskih zvijezda, donoseći nominacije za Emmy i vrstu kulturne relevantnosti koju malo koji glumac održava nakon desetljeća u središtu pozornosti. Ugovori o reklamiranju s L'Orealom, Smartwaterom, Emirates'om, Avenom i drugima donose preko $20 milijuna godišnje. Njezina neto vrijednost procijenjena na $320 milijuna rezultat je ne samo njezine glume, već i njezine poslovne oštroumnosti istih instinkata koji su je prije mnogo godina doveli do suosnivanja Plan B Entertainmenta. No, ono što je sada definira nije veličina njezina bankovnog računa, već oblik njezinih dana. Izgradila je život koji je zauzet, ali ne i užurban, društvena, ali ne i eksponirana. Vrijeme provodi sa svojim najbližim prijateljima, Courtney Cox, Jasonom Batemanom i malim odanim krugom koji su bili uz nju kroz sve uspone i padove. Umjesto da prisustvuje beskrajnim hollywoodskim zabavama, priređuje intimne večere. Povlači se u Montecito kada joj treba više mira šetajući pse uz obalu gdje nikoga nije briga za naslove. Zna da mediji nikada neće u potpunosti pustiti ono što je počelo s Bradom i Jen i evoluiralo u Brangelinu. Čak i sada, godinama nakon Bradova razvoda, od Angeline šuška se o prijateljskim susretima, fotografijama isprepletenim u sugestivne priče. Jennifer im se sada smiješi ne zato što su istinite, već zato što je prestala morati ispravljati dosje. Znam svoju istinu, rekla je, i to je konačno dovoljno. Her philosophy these days is simple. Take care of herself, protect her privacy, and speak out when it matters. She continues to push back against the policing of women's bodies, the casual cruelty of gossip culture. She is not interested in rewriting her life to fit a fairy tale anymore. The fairy tale she has learned is being able to choose her own ending. The girl who once dreamed of a home filled with children has made peace with the life she has, even if it is not the one she imagined. That peace was hard-won, built brick by emotional brick, and guarded with the same care she gives to her roses, her friendships, her work. In the end, Jennifer Aniston's present is not a consolation prize for what might have been. It is a life rich and intentional that she has claimed entirely for herself. And if the echoes of old pain sometimes still whisper through the quiet rooms of Bel Air or Montecito, they do so in a space she built on her own terms, terms where she can close the door, breathe deeply, and know she has survived everything the world thought might break her. In the end, Jennifer Aniston's life is not a story of what she lost, but of what she chose to build from the pieces. She has loved and been left trusted, and been betrayed, dreamed, and been denied. She has faced the glare of the world in her most vulnerable moments and still found the courage to walk forward. The absence of children did not make her life empty. It made her strength visible in other ways. She has learned that family can be chosen, that love can take many forms, and that fulfillment isn't measured by how closely you match someone else's expectations. At 56, She stands as a woman who has turned heartbreak into art pressure, into purpose, and solitude into self-mastery. Hers is a reminder that even when the life you planned slips away, the life you create can be just as beautiful, sometimes more so, because it is yours alone. What do you think? Does Jennifer's journey make you rethink what happiness and having it all truly mean? Share your thoughts, because somewhere, someone might need to hear that their own story is still worth writing.